Wonderful to be lost in His Word and to just allow it to speak to us. I'd like to ask you a question this morning. If I were to ask you this question, are we to obey the laws of the Old Testament? Some of you would say, no. You're partially right. Some of you might say, well, maybe. You're partially right. And some of you might say, yes. And guess what? You're partially right. Most people don't know that because they have a terrible time trying to transfer between what did Jesus say? I didn't come to destroy the law, I came to fulfill it. But what are we supposed to do with that? Well, the problem is there are three types of laws in the Old Testament. We're going to begin by looking at Leviticus. This is the ceremonial law that was given. And it was instruction that was given and how they were supposed to do certain things. It's rather interesting because we find that God calls Moses in for a God time, one-on-one, to give instructions on how they were to present animals as a sacrifice for their sins and for the other things that they needed to do. Now, there were different types of offerings. There's peace offerings and there was first offerings and all of the other, but we're primarily talking about the burnt offering here and what was supposed to do and how it was supposed to come. They were supposed to pick the young lamb or the young goat without blemish, or if they didn't have the money that they needed and that kind of livelihood, why they certainly could bring a dove even would be sufficient to come in for an offering. Now, one of the interesting things as we go through this, he talks about all the problems, even about, there's no question how it was to be prepared, because he even talked about what are you supposed to do with the internal organs and everything that is in it. But the priest was to burn the entire sacrifice on the offering. It was a special gift, a pleasing aroma to God. It has to be from your flock, and it has to have no defects. There was even a place they had to go to the north side of the altar to offer that as a sacrifice. And then the priest would place and arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat on the wood burning on the altar. Now, there is all the significance of what they're supposed to be doing there, and the procedures to the grain offering. And then we go in chapter 3 is the peace offering. Chapter 4 is the sin offering. Now I want you to understand these laws that were given to Moses and he gave them to the people are not for us to have to follow today. These are not laws we have to keep. You understand that what they were doing is they were giving sacrifices unto Jesus, who was going to come several thousand years later. Now, Jesus has already come. He's been put on the cross. He was put in the grave. He resurrected, as we all know the Easter story very well. But the fact is this. He is the final sacrifice that is needed. You can offer all the animals you want, and it's not going to save you. It is by the redeemed blood of God's very Son, Jesus, who gives us eternal life and salvation.
Hallelujah.
So the question is, do we have to keep the ceremonial laws of the Old Testament? The answer is no, because we have Jesus. Some of us would have to have a large flock for the sins we commit. But we find here that it was a fact of what they had to do. Now, the problem is that in the early church, there was a problem because this transition took place, and the Jewish Christians thought the Gentile Christians weren't really Christians because they didn't do this law. And we find that Paul in the book of Acts, we find it in all the books he wrote, he had to address this, that it was Jesus and Jesus alone. I want us to understand that in the 21st century, we have a lot of things that take the place of the animals. If we be good, if we pay, if we do good deeds. These are similar to the animals that were sacrificed in the Old Testament. They will never get you to heaven no matter how many of them you do. You got to have the saving grace of Jesus. Amen. Now, let's go to the second one. Now, the second laws that we find in the Old Testament is the civil law. And these were laws that were primarily dictated for daily living. And we know that modern society and our culture is different, and some of these guidelines cannot be followed exactly. But the fact is, they give a good standard. Now we might say, well, we don't have to keep these. Well, we have. You know what? I just looked. How many laws did they pass this past week? I would really like to know how many laws in each state and how many laws in our federal government were passed this past week. And do you even know what they are? I think it's interesting. What is it? Did you know that in Minnesota, as I understand it, that the first weekend in May is what? Opening of fishing. But we didn't have it the opening weekend because it was Mother's Day. Oh, can you imagine all the people going fishing on Mother's Day? They would have came home to a really upset mother. So we had it this last weekend. Isn't that wonderful? We can just adjust it. But when it came to Old Testament law, it was the law. And if you didn't abide by it, you were probably stoned rather quickly. Now, I looked at that and I thought about, well, what on earth is it? Well, if we go to Deuteronomy and we pick it up there in the, let me get there, I'm not quite with you. Deuteronomy chapter 24, we find that there are some things that he's saying we need to do. Now, I thought it was interesting. It starts out. Suppose a man marries a woman, but she does not please him. Yeah, stop right there. Maybe you should read, suppose a woman marries a man that doesn't please him. Her, I should say. Him in today's society. He writes her off with a divorce and hands it to her and sends her away. Really? That simple. In some cultures, all the man has to do is to go out on the steps. I'm divorced. And she's gone. That's it. Done. Over. In America, we get divorced too. Gone away sometimes. That isn't how it works. And so then there's all the laws of how you can marry again. And then we go down to all the things about diseases. There's a lot of things in here that could really help in modern day society. But I want you to know something. The fact is that we have diseases that were never heard of back then. But they're finding that a lot of the cures that were given back in Leviticus and Deuteronomy are cures that doctors are going back to because it works. Really. They're finding that a lot of the natural things are much better for you than the medicine. I talk to people who take 28 pills a day. 28. How does that pill know where to go? And how do I know that it isn't fighting with the one that's coming behind it? You know? I take medication for 3 things. I have a thyroid problem, and I don't have a thyroid. It's really what I got. I got a thyroid in there, but it doesn't work, so I got to take something for that. this thing called sugar diabetes. I take medication for that, a lot of medication for that. And then I have this anxiety. And on the bottle it says, take before you eat. Take 2 hours after you eat. Take with a full glass of water. Blah, blah, blah. I just go in the morning, get my pills, pop them all in my mouth, and send them on their way. Really? We have become a pill society. Look at how many problems we're having with people with medication, overdosing. Because they can go to this doctor, that doctor, and another doctor, and a doctor over here, and they get all these pills. And even though they try to put everything together, and the pharmacists are doing everything they possibly can to get everything so it's streamlined and everything comes together, sometimes it falls through the cracks. And we go in. Well, I got this. You know what happens? After a while, your body begins to create the problem in order to get the medication that it wants. How sad. But he says here, you're supposed to do things in a certain way. Interesting now that we have... Let me read this law. I'm not going to take the time to read all this morning, but let me just pick this one out. It says, parents must not be put to death for the sins of their children. But now we are charging parents for the sins of their children in America. Sometimes it should be. If a dad leaves a gun lay out and that kid picks it up and shoots one of his siblings, that parent should be held accountable. If it's negligence, don't hide behind this. But in some cases, the parents are totally unaware of what took place. And if they're a juvenile, in some cases are held accountable. We need to be careful because we can be held accountable if we're going to teach our children to make them go to church or some other things that are religious. The parents should have been working on training their child in the first place and using discipline so that the child doesn't sin. But if the child does sin, it's our parent responsibility to hold them in prayer and to love them where they're at. Sometimes when kids grow up, you teenagers and you kids that are growing up, I've got one in here today. So I'm talking to you. Sometimes we need to put you back at 5 years old and put us over your knee. Put you over our knee and give you a good paddling. It would be much. I don't know why you kids don't all leave home when you're 14. You got all the answers. Just go out in life and do it. You know how it is. You're going to find out it's not as easy. And you could find out that you got the worst, that the parent isn't as bad as you thought it was. You could have a lot worse. But the point is that when it comes to civil law, the principles behind these commands should guard us even in the 21st century. And what the legislatures and the congressmen and people in leadership of our states and the federal government need to go back to the Bible and see what the Bible has to say before they pass a law. Because all of a sudden we are passing laws because of one thing or another rather than the whole of taking care of the situation. And what we need to do is we need to promote, here's a new concept, America. Let's promote unity instead of division. And I might say to you in Washington, why don't you spend more time working together instead of against each other and get something done that's worthwhile. We have to come to the 21st century of a nation that is so divided socially, racially, spiritually. We are divided. And we could care less of forming any unity. How sad. 2 major shootings this weekend of a kid who traveled 200 miles to go into a black grocery store and shoot it up. Where were the people that were watching his Facebook? It's been on there for weeks. Oh, let's take Christianity off Facebook. Even if you don't like Trump, he said a lot of things that were a lot less offensive than people talking about killing people and going and doing it. Let's get it right. I have been in the hospital dozens of times with all kinds of colored people, and guess what? When you bleed, it's all red. There's no different colors. You can't tell the one from the other. You got to have a microscope. You got to go into the lab to find out what type of blood it is. You can't tell it by looking at it. Once we get a hold of the blood of Jesus Christ and make that priority, we're becoming a more divided society. Civil laws were put in order so that we could live together in unity and have a line. And I want to tell people right now that if you cross that line, you do not have the right to go into somebody else's privacy in their life. It ends where someone else's begins. No matter what you hate or don't like. My grandma used to always say, get over it. Get over it. Well, let's go over to Exodus chapter 20. There's an interesting set of laws. This sort of law is a direct command of God. And it requires strict obedience. Old Testament, New Testament, early church, 24th century. Here is the problem with America and the world. Some places, as close as Faribault in one of their public places, has erased the first commandment off of the 10 commandments. And that's the beginning of the problem. The 10 commandments were not given for Moses to sit up in the mountain and God writing them. Just think, poor Moses, God comes down the first time and he takes up 2 stones and God writes the commandments on them. And he comes down and what does he find? The whole people of Israel have a big golden calf that said, well, we just threw our gold together in the fire and that's what came out of it, even though it says they use graven tools. He gets mad and he smashes the stones. And then God calls him back up again, and now he's got to chisel him out this time. God doesn't come down and do the easy work. Yeah, I think, God, sometimes I just don't understand you. It wasn't Moses' fault. But he responded in anger. You probably should have set him down and saved him for later. You see, when we do things in anger, we sometimes can't retrieve that. It's over. So he goes back up again. First tablet. 4 commandments. All about God. Thou must not have any other God before me. Really. If you in your life have anything that takes more time and takes the place of your time with God, you've got a problem. Hello? If you're too busy to pray and to get into the Bible, then you need to get along with God and say, God, what do I got to do to change? Hello? I want to give me a job. You know that? I work harder now that I'm semi-retired than I did before. Because everybody, can you help me? Can you do the... The only thing I like about being semi-retired is I get to do the dishes. It gets my hands all nice and clean and soft. So I told Debbie, leave the dishes. I'll do them. I'll be happy to do them. But we get too busy. We get too busy doing nothing. Not one thing should be before us. Nor shall you, the second one, make any graven image. Hello? What's your image? One guy said he isn't getting married. He's got a truck. He decides he can't have both. Life is too expensive, and he likes his big truck. Can I just sneak something in here? God's blessed our church. It's just been a miracle. But you know what surprises me? All of us will go into a restaurant and tip some little girl 20% if we don't even know her. But let's give 1% to Jesus. Hello? Well, let's go on. You're not supposed to have any graven images. Don't even make something. You ever go around and see these idols? See Buddha? I like to go up to him and just scratch his head. I can just see the people going, really? I tell you what, if you want to talk to some stone or some metal, it could be anything. It's going to do the same thing. Hello? You might as well go out in the backyard and talk to a fence post. In fact, we're teaching people that God can be anything. You just got to find Him. Oh, I got this tree in the backyard. I got this tree in my backyard. It's a cherry tree. You ought to see it this morning. Woo! It's beautiful. But I can go out to that cherry tree, and I can even hug it, and I can pray to it. I might as well save my breath. This is not going to answer me. It's going to answer the birds. They're going to have a whole bunch of cherries pretty quick. I get nothing. I can't figure out how people can put faith in some type of an image that can't talk, can't hear, can't think, can't do nothing. You might just as well have a stuffed animal. The same response. You must not misuse the name of the Lord your God. You know, people ask me as a pastor, what's a swear word? If you got to ask me if it is, it probably is. Some aren't really swear words. They're just slang words that are not proper. You know, it's bad enough to hear a guy, I'm sorry, I'm kind of prejudiced here. It's bad enough to hear a guy use foul language, but it's worse to hear a woman say it. It somehow belittles the sanctity of her, of who she is. Clean it up. Clean it up. Bite your tongue. Oh, remember the Sabbath day? Yeah, I got to keep that holy. You know, when I lived in Michigan, there was a group of people that had a lot of churches on the west part of Michigan, and I could never figure out that on Sunday, they made all their meals on Saturday for Sunday. You couldn't play any games, but you could sit in the backyard and drink beer. And half of them would go to church at night and not too good a shape, but that was okay. It's amazing to me how we take things and change it around to fit what we want and what should be. The Sabbath day is really something we need to keep. Now, I've been trying to work on the day off because I've worked every Sunday since I can remember. Almost every Sunday. People come up to me, and in fact, this morning, the people who were supposed to bring treats today are sick, so I went to get treats, and the guy at the station looked at me and he said, Pastor, you know, if I didn't have to work, I'd be in your church this morning. I just hate it. I got to work every Sunday morning. I looked at him and said, I hate it too sometimes. I work every Sunday morning too. The point is, what are you doing? Sometimes we don't get a choice. Sometimes work dictates when we need to be at work. And as a good Christian and a great employee, we need to do it without grumbling. But we also need to take some time off. Well, shall I go on? Well, I like these commandments. You know, the first one he comes up with is, honor your mother and father. This is the only commandment that has a promise attached to it. It says, then you will live a long, full life. Ooh, that's tough. Do you know how many times I heard that? That's the only commandment I heard over and over. My mother used to just have, son, God says you're to honor your parents. Yes, yes. Sorry, till next time. You must not murder. We got a big problem right now with abortion and what's happening, and we can blame the left or the right, or the conservatives or the liberals, who leaked what and whatever. But it's amazing to me that we can get all excited about the gun violence that's happening in America, but there are more people dying by abortion than there are by the gun violence. And we don't care. You mustn't steal. Really? You know, I had a lot of trouble with that verse because we had a guy in our church in Michigan that every Sunday would drop in a $100 bill. Way back in those days, he owned First National Bank, half of it in Jackson, Michigan. Put in a $100 bill, and by the time it got to the back, it was gone. 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 And so we finally had to take the usher on that side, that when he would hand him the plate, the usher would have to take the 100 out before he could pass it on, because it wouldn't be to the end. Now that's real audacity to stand up in front, big city of the church, and take money out of the offering plate. I mean, if you got a need, you should ask. But to just take it out. At first we thought maybe it was somebody put in a 20 and they thought they got a 10 for change. Maybe that's what they were doing. Except they knew they were getting 100. I mean, after the first time, would you know that you got 100 when you got home and pulled your pocket out and you had a $100 bill in there? Wouldn't you know that you got the wrong one? But he had to take it out every week. But I won't steal. But we steal time from God. That's maybe over sin. Or just as bad. I will not test falsely against my neighbor, even if they ain't no good. Oh my. Don't you just love it? I'm going to tell you one thing, folks. If you're in a group of people and they're talking about somebody, I want you to be assured they're talking about you when you leave. You know what? Sometimes I go back to the towns that I previously pastored in just to find out what I've been doing since I left. I had no idea. Let's get over this fact. Every single one of us have somebody we don't like. Or two. Or three. And probably in most cases a relative. Or the neighbor next door. You could have a worse neighbor. Sometimes it's really tough because there aren't a lot of good people in the world anymore. And you know what? It is tough for us as Christians to live when we got those people surrounding us. But that's the test. You have a right to feel bad and be discouraged. But the reaction is, what do we do back? I want to tell you something right now. If people today don't start taking responsibility for their own actions and quit blaming everybody else, I want you to know you're in for a tough life. And you're going to be the most unhappy person ever in the world. And what your job is to make everybody else miserable so you can be happy. How sad is that? Yesterday, as we were finishing up the garage sale, Debbie said, I got to go back in. I got a little church work to do. And I go, yes. We're going to get rid of the rest of this stuff. It's gone. I was given a chair on Friday, and it was a wonderful leather electric recliner chair. The wife decided that she wanted to have, in this little love seat, one of these that both sides remotely reclined. So he decided that he needed a new chair. She got a new couch that reclined. He had one that reclined, but he needed a new one. So he got it. And I got the old one. It's nice brown leather one. That's sitting right out front. A couple came by. They looked at that chair. They looked at that chair and they said, how much? I said, what are you willing to give? We don't have very much. Well, you want to just load it? You should have seen the happiest two people you could ever see in your life. When they backed that pickup up to load it up, she got a $5 bill out of her purse and gave it to me. I didn't want to take it, but she insisted. But they were excited. But they were really poor. I don't know how many people we helped yesterday doing that. I was not packing stuff up one more time. And if it had been on the sale last year and then at our house and this year at our house and then here, it's gold. But it's amazing to me how many people actually have nothing. Gave me a new understanding of the situation we're in our world today. Go to the grocery store. $20 you can carry it out in one bag with no meat. Where's it going to end? I believe the only way that we're going to change this world is it's going to have to be a God thing. Because we're heading for an economic crisis worldwide. Don't get excited about it, folks. Don't worry about it, because that's all part of setting up the whole world one government. It's just all heading in one direction. It's okay, because we're getting out of here. But the fact of it is that the old Indian proverb is, don't criticize me till you walk a mile in my moccasins. And we got a lot of people that come to church as well and go to church all over the place that are hurting just as bad. And then we as the church do better by kicking them and stomping them and shooting them while they're down, instead of picking them up. I don't know how I got on that subject, but I did. Don't covet your neighbor's house. Well, you can covet my house if you want. You just got to make the payment. That'll be fine. You want to keep up with the Joneses? You'll never do it. It's just the time you catch up with us, we refinance. And then you're behind again. Oh, really? Well, don't covet anything. Don't commit adultery. All things that God's given. Those are the moral laws that you and I must keep. Ceremonial laws, that's changed. Civil laws, they're a good standard, a good base. But when it comes to the moral law, we have no choice. And I'm telling you that if America would do the Ten Commandments, we would not need another law in this country. Except maybe you must stop at a stop sign. I think you only have to stop at stop signs that are important. I mean, we have a T in our neighborhood, and that T is a stop sign, but there's only people coming from one direction. Nobody is. Why do I have to stop? Somebody was with me the other day, and I just rolled right through it. He looked at me and said, Pastor, I said, what? God was watching. I said, watching what? Wasn't that a stop sign back there? Well, you see a stop sign. I see a yield sign. And then I find out that down the road, a couple of houses, a sheriff lives. Or one of the people that worked for the sheriff's department. I saw him yesterday when I was picking up the sign after the garage sale. He was wheeling sand over to his place from another place because they were getting rid of his sandbox and he needed some sand. So he was just wheeling it in a wheelbarrow. And we were talking a little bit. He said, by the way, Pastor, I just want you to know that that's not a yield sign. That's a stop sign. You probably should try to do that. So this morning I stopped. Are you getting it? Yeah, that's what God requires. Father, it's easier to make our own rules. It's even easier to blame others for the situation we're in. And yet we are responsible for everything we do on our own, regardless of how we were treated or what we did. Help us to be your child. And we look back in the Old Testament and say, that's the Old Testament, forget it. We live in the new. We live in the new 21st century. But certain things don't change. Though society tries to dictate it and culture begins to live it. So God, help us to follow your laws and the laws of the land, unless they become